Well, hello. Welcome to the Sober Healing Podcast. I am solo tonight. And there's a reason for that, as the title probably gives it away. I said that I would share my story again, to kind of update things where the podcast has been. And if I'm being honest, I really didn't want to do it. I was sitting here contemplating, watching the clock tick down, and it's like, I don't know. I have some anxiety about it, and I don't know what that's all about. But yeah, first to start off with, I would like to thank everybody that has listened and liked the podcast and followed over this journey of mine. It's been quite the journey, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. I hope everybody is doing very well out there, and I'll do the best I can to stay on point. I think that's why I have the anxiety on telling it, because I'm all over the damn place, and I don't know if the story flows like it should or not, but I'm going to give it my best go. So I think I mentioned this before in a couple of the podcasts with Adam that, podcasts have been pretty slow since probably around March of last year, maybe a little before that. My great-grandmother who raised me, who I'll talk about more later, passed away last year, and there was a month or two of a lot of running around trying to get things done, and then I had the cyst in my brain and had that removed in August of last year, and that set me back quite a bit. But I love doing this thing when I can, and I love talking with you guys and the discussions that we have on X and Facebook and anywhere that we have them. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you to everybody that's listening now, and thank you to anybody that listens later, if you're not listening to January 9th. So, my name is Scott, and I was born in 1991. Hi, Ellie. Good to see you again. It's been a minute. Born in 1981 to a 16-year-old woman and an 18-year-old man. And right from go, things were pretty rough for baby me. I was born very premature. My grandfather, my mom's father, said that he was able to hold me in one hand when I was born because I was that premature. As far as I know, and I'll say as far as I know a lot because the information that I was given from family members, I'm not too sure on how 100% it was, because a lot of people didn't like some people, and so it's really hard to go on what was 100% truth. But so anyway, I was born premature. My heart stopped, so I was technically dead for a little bit as a young baby. After being born, my mom took me to my great-grandmother's house, and I laid in a dresser drawer. That was my crib, because I had a heart monitor and other monitors on or whatever. One of them slept in the chair and one of them slept on the couch, and they had to sit and wait and listen for the monitor to go off. Before I was in kindergarten, I have the memory of being in, I know I kind of jumped from baby there, but it was just kind of a rough start. My mom was an alcoholic. Go back to that. My mom was was an alcoholic. So she had a lot of issues growing up. I don't want to share a lot of her story because I don't want to talk about her, if I'm being honest. She's just not a great human. And I don't want to bring up that negativity, but I say that now, and you never know what happens in the future, right? So anyway, fast forward a few years, my mom gave me up to my grandmother. I remember sitting in the courtroom, sitting on I don't know whose lap, I think my mom's lap. And I remember the judge asked me if I wanted to live with grandma. And I remember I shook my head, and the judge told me, and I was terrified. That's why I remember it. He's like, "We can't hear your head shake." And I was like, "Oh no, I'm in trouble." And so I had to say yes into the microphone. And so from then on out, I was living with Grandma Williams. And she was my mom. She was always my mom. And I owe her everything. She is the one person that uh, never didn't answer my phone call, never gave up on me. For 43 years. She was 99 when she passed, but for 43 years, she had my back on every turn. Some would say I could do no wrong in her eyes, and there's probably some truth to that because I did a lot of wrong, and she kind of looked the other way sometimes because I was Scotty. So some things that I think are important that are harder to talk about, but they need to be said because I feel like if I can show some vulnerability, maybe somebody will hear this and they'll want to talk about it. So one thing that I don't really remember happening to me, but I know that it did, was some sort of sexual abuse when I was younger. I thought it was one person that did it, and then I heard it was somebody else. Again, that information comes from my mom, but I'm very confident that it happened. And I'm very confident that it happened because of the thoughts that I was having in kindergarten about the girls in my class. That's a pretty good indicator. Boys at that age are probably supposed to think that girls have cooties, and it was the complete opposite. I was thinking more like a teenage boy, like a 17, 18, 19-year-old teenage boy in kindergarten, thinking things about his classmates that he shouldn't be thinking. So that's always been something, and I carried, as I got older and I kind of thought about some of the things that I did and some of the things that I was thinking, I carried a lot of guilt with that. And as I think, Adam and I have talked about before in the podcast, once I broke the seal and began willing to talk about it, the guilt lessened and lessened. It's still there. I don't know if it'll ever be gone. I feel bad even having those thoughts, but it really wasn't my thought. It was, or my fault. I was in a situation that was pretty crappy. So nothing ever came about that. There was nobody that was ever, convicted or anything like that, or even really accused. I blamed a certain individual, which I won't say who it was. I don't know if it was them. It might have been their family member. I don't know. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So that was some baggage that I was carrying. I remember going and playing pickup sticks with a therapist when I was super young. She asked me a lot of uncomfortable questions, and I did not like it. And so from go, there was a lot of weird things. Mom wasn't there. Dad wasn't there. I was told that my dad was a piece of crap. And, my mom was never there, but grandma was always there. And I was kind of awkward. Grandma raised me very confined. I never got to go out and play in the mud or the dirt. You couldn't go outside and get dirty. You couldn't go outside when it was raining. If it was too hot, you couldn't go outside. If it was too cold, you couldn't go outside. If it was raining or could rain, you can't go outside, or a friend's house. That was kind of the situation. And she only, I don't know, because I never really had the conversation with her. I feel like because, her kids kind of had a bad way of it, they found addiction as well. And then my mom, who she helped raise, kind of had addiction as well. I think she was trying to protect me from the world. And her intent was absolutely pure. I believe that 100%. So as a little kid, you're feeling the abandonment, and I tell this story all the time to the clients, just to kind of relate a little bit. There were many times as a little boy that my mom or dad would call and say, "Hey, I'd like to come see you today." And super excited me would say, "Heck yeah." I'd get outside, I'd get my toys around and ready to show them. And I'd go sit out by the front window at grandma's house. And the way it kind of is, the window's sitting here, and there's a road that kind of comes off to the left, comes out and intersects with the road that we lived on. Excuse me. And I remember sitting out there, and I called it Grandpa's chair because that's where he'd sit and smoke before he passed. and I'd sit in Grandpa's chair and I'd look out the window and I'd just wait. And I remember I'd start to see like headlights or cars start to break through the row of trees that were there, and I'd get super excited. My heart start pumping. I'm like, "Oh, that's Mom!" And then the car would get to the edge of the trees, and oh, that's not Mom. And so, disappointment after disappointment. Eventually, my grandma quit telling me when they called and said that they want to come see me. Something else I found, and I've shared this before. Something else I found through my journey of recovery that. That was a form of trauma, not only from them saying they're coming and not showing up, but it was a form of trauma too, because grandma, in all her pure intent, would always tell me, well, don't cry. It's okay. Just don't think about it. Go play with your toys and don't think about it. And so what I've learned is that was so devastating to me as a little kid. When she was teaching me to go play with those toys and don't think about it, I was learning not to feel my emotions, not to address my emotions. And again, she just didn't want to see the little boy cry and be upset. So she didn't do anything bad, but I was learning to ignore it. So as I grew up, I got into baseball. That was the way that I would ignore. I had a bad day at school. I'd go outside to my grandma's house. It's made out of cinder blocks. It used to be my buddy's grandma went to school there. It was a cinder block house. And I'd go outside and I'd throw the baseball against the house and blow off steam. So baseball became my outlet, and I loved it. I loved baseball. I mean, it was, I hated the winter. I was always inside trying to throw the ball off something to be able to catch it. Started playing baseball, got pretty decent at it. Ended up getting letters from the White Sox and the Pirates to come try out when I was in high school. Got a full ride to college to go. And play for a D2. They were right down the road. I was super, okay. So I mentioned this earlier. Grandma wouldn't let me go outside if it's cold or hot or raining or could rain or whatever. She wanted to protect me. So I never got to do anything outside of school with friends. So I was pretty socially awkward. I was, I got voted, most athletic and all these other things because I was good at sports. But I really didn't have the people skills at all. And so when it came time to go to college and to go play baseball for college and see where that would take me and get an education, I chickened out. And so that's another thing. You get letters from the White Sox, you get letters from the Pirates, and you go, and I tried out for the White Sox, and it was me and one other guy left on the mound pitching. And it was pretty cool. It was looking back at it, that's really cool that I was able to experience that. But still in the back of my head, I said, what if, so kind of how that went was, again, with the restriction that grandma gave me, I still talked to my mom. I didn't really talk to my dad that much, maybe here and there. He'd stop by for birthday or Christmas. But I take responsibility for that now because I didn't get the evidence for myself of what kind of human he was. I just took my mom's word for it, my grandma's word for it. My grandma was taking my mom's word for it. So after high school, when I graduated, I wanted some freedom. And my mom would let me stay up when I'd go there. A few times that I did and stay the night at her house. I got my driver's license. I thought it was so cool. I'm 16 and my mom's letting me stay up as late as I want and drink Dr. Pepper all night and eat popcorn all night and salt and vinegar chips and play computer games. I thought it was so cool. And so I wanted that freedom. And so it came time to go to college, and it was a 3-day orientation. And I remember halfway through the orientation on day 2, I called my mom at lunch and I said, I don't think I can do this, Mom, because I was terrified. I didn't want to go to a class with a bunch of people. It was in a town that was pretty preppy, and I was not preppy. And it was a college that, I just took the first offer I got. When it came in, I just accepted it because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. So anyway, at noon on the second day of orientation, I called my mom and said, I don't think I can do this. And there was no fight. It was, okay, come home. And I was like, I remember how shocked I was to hear her say that, because I thought for sure I was going to call her and she's going to give me some speech, and which she should have. I think anybody else, I would have said to my kids, well, give it a semester, and if you hate it, then you can quit, or you can transfer or go somewhere else or whatever. But that didn't happen. So the guilt from my thoughts and activities as a kid that was sexually abused, and my guilt for giving up baseball and a great opportunity that I had, uh, stayed with me. Um, when I turned 21, I had no baseball, I had no job, I had no relationship with my mother because, well, I should probably go back. After staying with her for a while, things started to get really weird. Um, like the time that she went on a women's retreat and then came home with the dude into her house while she was married to the one guy that I considered a father figure at that time. Um, so she'd went away to cheat on this guy, and that was, boy. I remember even when they walked in together, she's like, "Oh, if looks could kill," and I remember saying, "If only." Um, so I ended up moving out of there. Then I come to find out that she charged a credit card in my name. So, like I said, I told you I didn't want to really talk too much about her because it's really nothing positive. It's going to be all negative, and that's not going to do me any good. But I found all this out. I turned 21. I had said from go I was not going to be an alcoholic like my mom and my dad. And I turned, but well, actually, it was a week and a half before my 21st birthday. The roommates that I had, they had turned 21 in October. My birthday was November 10th. So at the end of October, they were turning 21. So we all drank. So almost 21 before I had my first drink. And I loved it the moment that it went in my body. I started with Mike's Hard Lemonade and got a few of those in me. And I remember walking down the hall and kind of bumped into the wall, and I laughed my ass off because I'm like, oh, this is what being drunk feels like. And so once I fell in love with that, it goes back to when grandma was telling me to just don't think about it. Don't worry about it. Go play with your toys. So once I got that effect of alcohol, every time I felt shitty, and every time I wanted to feel good, if I'm being honest, but excuse me, every time that I felt shitty, alcohol did exactly for me what grandma told me to do. Don't think about it. Don't worry about it. Go play. And so I'd go drink and I'd play video games, have a party, listen to music. And so I became dependent on that. I became dependent on alcohol to help me get through what was going on up here. And then later on, years down the road, I got really dependent on it. So my drinking led to me and my best friend not being friends anymore. Um, it was a series of events, but the one thing that stuck out in my head, was I was drunk and I had people over without really asking him, and then there was an old wooden table that belonged to his mom's mom, or his dad's mom. I'm not sure which one. But either way, I was trying to start a fire in our fire pit, and I drunkenly went in there and grabbed one of the table legs. And that helped me start the fire. That was part of the wood that I was burning. And so that wasn't a deal breaker, but it was a lot of things. I started, I cared more about drinking than hanging out with my friends. I cared more about drinking um, and girls than doing things with my buddies. And so I turned into a completely different person pretty quickly. Um, so a couple years into my drinking, I was off to the races. I was still at the point where it's like I couldn't wait for the weekend to get there so I could drink, but then I'd wake up on Sunday morning and be like, I'm never doing that shit again. But every weekend it would. I wasn't drinking during the week, and I was drinking more than everybody else. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, well, as long as I'm not drinking during the week and I don't miss work from it, then I'm fine. But eventually, like a lot of us, that ended up happening anyway. So move out of my buddy's house, move in with a girl. Never did one good right thing for her, I don't think, other than not. I mean, I was nice to her, but I didn't have a job and help pay the bills. I wasn't mowing the lawn. I wasn't doing anything for her. So I feel terrible for those 3 years or 3.5 years for that, because she was a really good person. So we broke up, and I ended up getting my first DUI. I actually met up with the friend that I was talking about, and we went to a bar and played some pool, and it was a good talk, but it just wasn't like it was. And so I was drinking before I got there. I drank while I was there, and then I drove home and nodded off. I woke up to weeds on the edge of the ditch hitting the front of my car. And I was like, oh shit. And I adjusted the wheel and rolled it. I don't know how many times. I wish I still had a picture of it, because when I went to the impound to, or maybe it wasn't the impound, but wherever they took it, when I went to get it, there were only a handful of cars in this place. And I didn't recognize my car. It was flat. It was navy blue, but it looked gray from all the dust and the paint that it came off. And I was like, wow. So my arm was kind of messed up. And I really didn't get hurt. I say messed up. It was glass, broken fingernail and a bruised shoulder. I rolled that car, I don't know how many times, and I walked out of there with a bruised shoulder and glass in my hand. That's pretty damn lucky. And so that kept me on the straight and narrow as far as drinking for a while. Lost my license, because that's what happens after you get a DUI, and I quit my job. So I was back to not having a job for a very long time. So that was in 2008. I ended up meeting a woman. We got married. Her dad gave me a job. I started out as a painter, then I moved up to safety guy, and then I ended up as a project manager. We had 2 boys, Gage and Easton, who you've probably seen on the podcast or some of my posts when I post the picture. They're the greatest things that I've ever done. So the marriage itself wasn't that great. And I played a large part in that. I believe that it was equal shitty, but I'm not going to deny my shittiness in that. It wasn't happy, especially towards the end. And so I started, after the boys were born, when we found out that we were pregnant, I was drinking about a fifth a night, getting up and going to work. And I was doing it every single day. I would buy 4 pints of peppermint schnapps every day on the way home. I'd pick up my kids. I'd go get groceries. I'd come home and make dinner, feed everybody. I'd put my kids to bed. I'd put my wife to bed. And then I'd go sleep on the couch so I could have my time. And that's exactly how I felt. I had the baby monitor next to me. I had my iPad to watch Supernatural. And I had my 4 half pints. And that's what I did every single night. Probably for, I don't know, 8 years. And then 4 of those years were when the boys were born. And just to tell you how crazy it was, right? And I've talked about this a lot in my groups. The amount of work that I had to put in. So we had a joint bank account, and she was always checking to see where I was spending money, especially when she got on that I was starting to have a drinking problem. So I would go to the store and buy groceries and get cash back and forget the receipt, so she wouldn't see that I'd gotten cash back, so I could use that every day. I'd stop at the same party store every day. They'd have my 4 half pints waiting for me. Then I would wait for her to go outside and smoke, or I'd wait for her to go to bed. Then I'd run out to my work truck, pull my bottles out of the bottom of the seat, bring them in, tuck them under the couch. My heart is racing right now just talking about it, because it was one of those relationships where I got in trouble a lot. And like I said, I'm not going to discount the effort that I put into getting in trouble, but there was not much that I felt like I could do right. And that is not hating on my ex-wife either. She's done a fantabulous job. Yes, fantabulous. A fantastic, fantabulous job with the boys. Well, I was not in the picture while I was trying to get help. And quite honestly, before that, I was a raging drunk. She did a great job, and I appreciate more than I can put into words what she's done for those boys in my absence. So one day, there were a lot of times, just to kind of put this in context, and again, not to run her into the dirt either, because again, that's not what I'm trying to do. My phone would ring, and I would see that it was my ex-wife, and I would have to get up and leave where I was at, because I didn't know if I was getting yelled at or if it was going to be a decent conversation. And so this particular day, that I ended up getting my second drunk driving. I was being trained at a new job, and I answered the phone while I was sitting there getting trained, and she lit into me. I don't remember what it was. It doesn't matter, but she lit into me. So I got up and I walked outside, and she yelled and hung up on me. If you want to get me upset, hang up on me. When I get in, back and forth on the internet and stuff like that, I don't like to just, if somebody, you got to walk away sometimes. But if somebody just like, I don't know, that's a bad example. That's a terrible example. But anyway, so I hate it when she hangs up on me or would hang up on me. So I went inside. I'm crying because this was years and years of this. And I didn't want to leave because I loved my boys. And I'd had conversations with friends like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. I work for her dad. Well, her dad ended up finding a different job, but I was working with her dad for most of the time. And, that was my house. My kids were there. What do I do? I got to find a way to survive. And that sounds terrible, but I was doing it for my kids. And so anyway, I come back inside after this phone call and I'm crying. And the guy that was training me is like, dude, you all right? I'm like, I got to go home. I'm sorry. And so I left and I called my best friend and I was talking to him about it. And he's like, hey man, why don't you come over for dinner and we'll talk to you about it. Hey, RJ, been a while, man. Hope all's well. And my friend invited me over to have dinner. And I was like, no, man, I'm just going to my grandma's because I knew I had alcohol. I didn't tell him that, but I said, I'm just going to go to grandma's. I'm going to sit and think. So I went to grandma's and I started slamming alcohol. Well, as a lot of us have experienced, once we get good and drunk, we get some really good ideas. So my really good idea was don't call my friend and say, hey, I'm on my way. Just head to his house. So I'm drunk as a skunk, driving down US 10 here in Michigan between Midland and Clare. And I guess I got boxed in on the highway. I don't remember that. I remember drinking and I remember going around a turn on that highway right before things went black. And next thing I remember is being in a park and ride after apparently getting boxed in. And the cops are there talking to me. And I was arrested for DUI number 2. So these 2 DUIs, one was in 2008 and the other one was in 2018. So it's 10 years apart. And that's important because that'll come into play later in my mind. So off to jail I go. She doesn't know where I'm at. She's out driving around calling, trying to find out where I'm at. I'm in jail. They took my, they put you in a cell or whatever, and then you have to call. Well, that takes time sometimes. So I feel terrible because I was locked up and they were all worried about me. And finally I got a hold of her when I got to use the phone, and she freaked out, rightfully so. And I could hear my kids crying in the background. And long story short, her dad came and bailed me out, and she filed for divorce. So where I go back to the 10 years apart is very important in my mind. It's very important because I use that to justify that second drunk driving. Well, it's 10 years apart. My marriage wasn't going very well. I wasn't happy. I made a mistake, blah, blah, blah. I justified it left and right. So as soon as probation was on, okay, I should go back again. In 2008, when I got it, I didn't drink for a while. And I don't know what a while was, probably a couple months. And then a friend got married, and then I was right back into it. This time, I didn't even have a thought of quitting. I put all the blame on my ex-wife. It was completely unfair because she never put a bottle to my lips, not one fucking time. I didn't like myself. I was beating myself up for the choices that I'd made about baseball in college. I beat myself up for the shitty things that I was thinking as a little kid. And so it was wrong to do that, but that's what I did. And so we get a divorce, and I finally felt free. I ended up moving back to grandma's, so I was not free by any stretch of the imagination. Fun fact, grandma didn't change, even though I was an adult. She still didn't want me to go outside when it was too hot. She still didn't want me to go outside when it was too cold. She didn't want me to go outside when it was raining. She didn't want me to be out too late. She wanted to know where I'm at. She'd blow up my phone constantly. But for me, in that moment, it was a better life. And so as soon as I completed probation, I had to spend 10 days in jail for that one. As soon as I completed probation, I was right back to it. Um, Probably worse than ever. No, delete that probably. Absolutely worse than ever. So I went from only drinking on the weekends and saying on Sundays that I would never do that again and not wanting to drink during the week to drinking a fifth every single day, um, to after the divorce and after probation, I had so much shit that I didn't deal with. I wasn't there for my kids. I wasn't seeing my kids every day. I didn't go to college. I was, you know, all these things in my head. And it went from drinking a fifth every single day to now drinking on the job. I don't know if everybody knows who or what Dow Corning is, but I was working inside of Dow Corning. It's a very big chemical plant in Midland, Michigan. And I made it a game to drink at work. I would wait till about lunchtime, and then I'd go down first break or lunchtime. First break would have been about 10 o'clock, and I'd go down to the party store and act like I was just getting out of work because I had to have an excuse. Just third shifts kind of suck, man. I'm ready to go home and relax. And so then I would take the half pints back into the plant, and the game was I would slam one in a porta potty, I would slam one in one of the bathrooms, and then tuck it in the trash can. Um, or I would leave the plant and toss them out the window somewhere. It turned into a little fucking game. And the beautiful part of that is when they found the bottle in the bathroom trash can, I was the lead safety guy on that project, right? So the project, the customer, called me in and said, "Hey, this is what happened. Can you look into this?" I was like, "Wow, that's fucked up. I can't believe somebody's drinking on the job here. I will help you figure out who it is, and I'll get back to you if I figure anything out." Needless to say, the investigation was fruitless. Um, then COVID happened. So it ended up shutting down all but 2 jobs in Dow Chemical. That's how bad COVID was. There were 2 jobs that were considered priority that were left going. And unfortunately for me, or fortunately for me, I don't know which one yet, my job is still going. So then it went from drinking a half pint at work, to get me through the rest of the day, to where I was driving into the chemical plant with a fifth of vodka underneath my jacket. And the last time that I worked in there, I was doing what I call the plant tour. And I had a fifth of vodka, and I was chugging it, driving around the empty plant, basically. Then I go back to my job and check in. Well, I didn't go back to my job and check in this time. I ended up passed out on the side of the road from an apparent seizure. I woke up in the ER, had no idea how I got there. The nice lady there said, we think you had a seizure. And I was like, "Oh, where's my Jeep? What happened?" And I asked her, I'm like, what about alcohol kind of? She's like, "Well, there wasn't that much in your system." I don't know how the hell that's even possible. I have no idea, because I was legit drinking out of a fifth. So bullet dodged, because they thought that I had a seizure. They parked my Jeep in a parking lot so I could come get it later. They didn't breathalyze me, take a blood test, nothing. They just took me to the ER. So that could have been another DUI right there. That didn't stop me. Kept drinking. Finally, I was with Miley at this time. I should have mentioned that. Things were good. After that second one, I was still on probation, I believe, for a little while when we first met, and it was the best relationship that I've ever had. And I was super happy, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop the thoughts about drinking. And then when I was able to drink again and start drinking again, I couldn't stop. So my kids were in my life. They're getting to know Miley. I was living with Miley. She's great. Kid's great. I had a great job, and I just couldn't stop. So off I went to my first treatment. That was a complete disaster. Um, there are places out there, unfortunately, that just bring people in and pass them out. You know what I mean? Just they're getting them through the treatment to check a box, or I hate to say to make a little bit of money, but I learned nothing there. Basically, 90% of my time at this particular treatment was playing pool and watching TV and eating snacks. That was basically the entirety of that. I don't remember a thing that I learned in the groups or in a one-on-one. And I think for the 28 days that I was there, or maybe it was 26 days, because I ended up not going a month because the therapist told me, she's like, I don't, she's like, you seem like you have an idea what's wrong and what you need to change. And, I don't see you needing to stay the whole 30 days. And I was like, oh, shit, yeah. So I called Miley, and I'll never forget that conversation either, because I called Miley and I said, hey, my therapist said that I can come home early. And Miley's reaction was like, oh, okay. She was like, oh, no. And probably the reason why she said, oh, no, is because when I left, her brother-in-law and sister came over and kind of went through the basement. And what they found up in the drop ceiling were tons of bottles, tons of like food that I shoved up there for some reason. And so they took the whole drop ceiling down. So she got a real good idea of what I'd been lying and not being truthful about when they found all these things. So that's probably why she was concerned, and turns out rightfully so. I came home feeling better than I had in a long time. I just remember being on top of the world, but it didn't last long. And I don't remember what caused me to drink again, other than just wanting to. So fast forward a little bit, still fighting the drinking, still lying about the drinking. I started going to AA. I started working with a sponsor, but a lot of the times I would get on the meetings and be drinking off camera, because I'd be in the basement and I'd tell Miley I'm going to AA meeting. She'd be like, oh, that's great. But I was down there to drink. So finally, and this is something that comes up a lot too at work, and this is something that I think is very important. If you have somebody in your life that you love and they're going through this, you're not a bad person when you set a boundary and say, I can't be around this anymore. And that's what Miley did in 2019. I woke up one morning and a lot of my clothes were sitting on the table in the kitchen, and my stuff was sitting there, and I knew what was going on. So she'd set a boundary. She told me she couldn't worry about me all day, every day. She can't worry about where I'm at. She can't worry about what she's going to come home to and maybe find me dead. And there's more to it than that. She found me. I was passed out at a stop sign just off the expressway next to a state police post. Where that police post is from the stop sign on the exit ramp from the highway, I could probably throw a baseball and hit it. And I was there with my foot on the brake. It wasn't in park, at the stop sign, and she found me before the cops did. And that wasn't the first time. I was passed out at a high school near our house too, and another cop found me. But because I wasn't behind the wheel at the time, he told her, I don't remember any of this. I don't remember being passed out at the stop sign. I don't remember her I don't remember talking to the cop at the high school either. And he said, because he wasn't behind the wheel or whatever, he's like, but let me talk to him. And so I can't imagine, loving somebody with all your heart, and they're out there doing this to themselves and potentially you, right? I mean, Miley and I were going to get married. And if we would have been married and I would have killed somebody, that could have jeopardized not just me, but her. And so she did the right thing. And I applaud her for that as much as I can. In that time too, during COVID, there was another me passed out at a stop sign. My picture was kind of in the paper. It was from a distance, but I was passed out at the stop sign. Again, woke up in the hospital. Found out that I was passed out at the stop sign. The cops had impounded my vehicle, but they didn't give me a ticket. They didn't take my license plate. They didn't do anything. It was right in the middle of COVID. I don't know if that had something to do with it or not. So Miley and I were like, wow, you dodged a bullet on that one. That could have been another DUI. Well, turns out, sometime after Miley kicked me out and I went to my grandma's, and I was drinking worse than ever. Um, well, before I get to that part, so I'm living with grandma, and finally in January of 2022, I decided to put myself back into treatment, and I ended up at a place called Harbor Hall in Petoskey, Michigan, where I met the guy in the comments. If you can see it on Facebook, RJ. That was on my second trip, not my first one though. But so I went for 60 days, and I went in, and my God, was it amazing. Those people there and the counselors and the information that I learned was incredible. I was there for 60 days, and I was just going to stay. I hadn't really thought about it. And then a couple guys started leaving, and then they're like, hey, when are you leaving? I'm like, that's a great point. I should probably talk to my counselor. So I went and found my counselor, and he's like, yeah, I can release you on this day or whatever. And that was 60 days. So the moment, I wasn't thinking about drinking. I was just thinking about Miley and my boys. I was talking to them when I could. I wanted to make things right. I didn't think about alcohol or drinking hardly at all that entire time until he told me that I was going home. So I didn't do what I was taught. I didn't tell somebody about my thoughts because I didn't want to embarrass myself. And if I'm being honest, I didn't want them to tell me to stay longer. I was ready to go home once I heard that. So you were allowed to get cash. My grandma would send me cash, and I would buy cans of pop for my friends. So when I knew my release date was coming, I spent all my money on all the pop that I could. So I didn't have a dime in my pocket because I knew where my head was at. My grandfather came to pick me up, him and his buddy. They drove all the way up there. They picked me up. He's like, hey, I'm going to take you out to lunch. So I'm getting real food again for the first time after being in treatment. And so it was great, but my mind is just swirling. I barely enjoyed the food because I was so effed up in my head. And so got back to grandma's, and I remember getting to the house. I'm like, okay, it's okay. I don't have any money. And I hugged grandma, and grandpa gave me a hug, and he told me how proud of me he was. And then he shook my hand, and in his hand was $100 bill. And I looked at that $100 bill, and I was like, oh. And as soon as he left, and as soon as I got done talking with grandma, I went and I bought alcohol. And I remember I got the alcohol home, and I set the fifth on my computer desk, and I'm sitting there staring at it. And I don't know how long I stared at it and contemplated. It felt like forever. Could have been 5 minutes, could have been an hour. And just being back, I was back at grandma's, but Miley was still gone. The kids were hesitant. I'm back in reality. And that's the thing. When you go into treatment, it's not reality. You're sheltered from everything. And that's what we need sometimes. I get that. But when you come back home, everything's the same. That room was the same. The smells were the same. The bank account was still empty. There was no job. The kids weren't coming over on the weekend. Miley wasn't my fiance anymore. And I picked it up and started slamming it. That month led to the worst month of my life. I ended up, the cops came and finally arrested me a year and a half later for that DUI where I was in the paper and passed out the stop sign. So they did. They were charging me with it. They just didn't take me to jail, probably because of COVID. But I was driving around for a year and a half, drunk as a fucking skunk after that. Really piss poor move on their part. So they came, they picked me up, they took me to jail. And lo and behold, I miss shit. So in my time of drinking, when it started to get bad before the kids, I was going to a bar in my old hometown, the town that my dad lives in or works in with the farm or whatever. And him and I developed a little bit of a relationship. I was there throwing darts, getting drunk. And so I'd go up and talk to him because I was drunk. And we kind of developed a little bit of a relationship. And it was nice. It was nice to be able to talk to my dad, and I enjoyed talking to him. So he comes, I call him, and he bails me out from jail. And I give him a hug and tell him thank you. And they get me back home. And, I didn't stop. There was a point I woke up in the hospital. I don't know how many times my grandmother had to call, my great grandmother. She's like 97 at this time. She had to call the ambulance. I don't know how many times. And I woke up in the ER. I don't know how many freaking times. And the one time must have been passed out for I don't know how long in my bedroom before she found me, and woke up in the ER. And I got the paperwork later, and I actually took it with me when I went to treatment the next time. But anyway, my blood alcohol content was excuse me, a 0.46, and that was after being passed out on the floor for I don't know how long. So probably my blood alcohol content was probably closer to 0.5 when I went down. And so I was in the ER for that, and I didn't have any way to get home. I wanted to check myself out AMA. I called Miley, and because she's a wonderful human that she is, she came in, and a family friend that had been looking out for my grandma because of my drunk, stupid ass. She came. I don't know how she knew, but she came to the hospital, and she was yelling at me and told me that Miley didn't want to talk to me, and she convinced Miley not to take me home. And I said screw it, so I started to try to walk home from the hospital. And I didn't realize it until later that the security guard wasn't following me out to the road to make sure I was safe. He was following me so that as soon as I left the property, he was going to call the cops. But luckily, in my state of mind, I decided that it was too cold and I couldn't walk home in a gown. I was exhausted, and I went back in the hospital and checked myself back in. So, and I've told this story before too. This is also the 30 days where I wore the t-shirt for pants at the gas station. If you haven't heard that story, the only thing I really remember was there's a gas station right across the street from my grandma's house, like 50 yards. Spent a lot of time there as a little kid and a teenager, buying a lot of pop and chips, and they ended up cutting me off from alcohol prior to this event. And I went over there, and I remember walking through the parking lot, and everybody's getting gas over here to my left. And the only thing that I remember is, God damn it, my pants won't stay up. And they kept falling down. I kept grabbing and holding them up. So finally I get into the store. I'm standing at the freezer section. I'm going to get myself something to eat. And the nice lady that had been working there for years came up and like, hey, I can't have you in here. I have to protect my girls. Because it was all women working. I was like, oh, okay. And I went home. Because I was never mean drunk. You know what I mean? Not overly belligerent, I don't think. I'm sure somebody could find a scenario, somebody that knows me that I was, but I left. And so turns out it was shirt for pants. That's why my pants wouldn't stay up. My legs were through my armholes, and that's why the shirt wouldn't stay where it was supposed to, or the pants wouldn't stay where they're supposed to. So kind of a fun blurb of this worst month of my life. So this is another highlight that I think is important. So I decided that I'd had enough again. And so I called Harbor Hall one more time, and I talked to the guy that did the intakes, and he's like, yeah, man, he's like, I don't have a bed for a couple days. And I was like, shit, okay, all right, well, I guess I'll see you in a couple days then. And so I hung up. Again, had a fifth sitting there on the desk, and I'm like, yeah, dang it, a couple days. And then I'm like, okay, well, I got a couple days. I'll drink for a couple more days, and then I'll go into treatment. Dude calls back like 5-10 minutes later, and he's like, hey, I can get you in. Can you get here today? I was like, oh, okay. Let me make some calls, and I'll call you back. Hung up the phone, set it down, stared at the alcohol, stared at my phone, stared at the alcohol, stared at my phone, grabbed the alcohol, took a big swig, called him back. It's like, yeah, man, I tried. I can't find anybody to get me down there today. I'll have to come in a couple days. Oh, okay. My mind was ready to go to treatment. And if you would have told me that I could have got there when I first called him, I would have made the phone call and I would have done everything that I could to be heading up there. But the moment, just like when my counselor told me that I was leaving, my mind went sideways. Just like when he told me I had to wait 2 days, my mind was already made up of what I was going to do, whether I was trying to convince myself that I wasn't thinking that or not. So 2 more days and then back in treatment. This time I went, and the plan was to stay as long as I could. I was in treatment for, I think, around 80 some days, almost 90 days. And then I went straight from treatment on the same lot right next door to sober living. Things were going very, very well. I got a job at Dunham's. I'd never worked at a sporting goods store. And then I got a job as a tech at another facility that was close by up there. Yeah, it's like two pretty good treatment centers within 10 miles of each other up there. It's insane. So working at the treatment center, everything, like I said, was going pretty good. Then all of a sudden my time was up at Sober Living. And the guys warned me when I got there, like, it goes so fast, man. You got to be prepared, got to get working on where you're going to go and what you're going to do. And my plan was to stay up there. Everybody was telling me to stay up there. The sponsor that I had at the time was a different sponsor than the first one. We had been talking every single day. And I would get on and talk to him every single day on Zoom, drunk as a skunk. And he supported me, even supported me to the point that I asked him one time, like, hey, do you think weed would help me get off alcohol? And he's like, at this point, you're going to die. I want you to try anything. So I called my dad, who was the weed expert. And here he comes. And I smoked pot. I'd smoked pot several times, but I was too drunk for it to ever work. And I probably wasn't smoking it right, if I'm being honest. So I smoked pot with my dad in my grandma's driveway and got high for the first time. The trees were beautiful. The lights were beautiful. Everything was fucking beautiful. And I remember just saying to myself, I'm like, this is it. This is the answer. I'll just smoke pot. So my dad gave me a big bag of pot, and I'm up in my room. He brought me a pipe, and I'm just smoking away. And I'm like, this is it. But what ended up happening was I just ended up high and drunk all the time. It really didn't stop anything because I didn't know what to do with myself other than that. So anyway, my sponsor, and I were talking, and my grandfather again takes me up to treatment. I go into treatment. I'm there. I go to Sober Living. I get a job at the recovery house. My time runs out at Sober Living, and I'm living in my truck for a night. And that's all it took. I parked in a casino parking lot. Well, I stopped and got some alcohol, parked in a casino parking lot, went in, gambled a little bit, came out, slept in my truck for the night, woke up the next morning, went to Wendy's. Miley called me because she was proud of me and everything that I'd done. And everything was pretty good. My kids were, kind of talking to me. After not talking to me for a while, it was 2 years that I didn't really talk to my boys. And they were 8 and 9 and 10 at the time. So a real young age when they need their father to be around and not be a drunken idiot. And I was working at the treatment center. I loved it. Everything was good, but I was homeless. And that freedom that I wanted from grandma, that freedom that I wanted from the marriage that I didn't like, I had freedom again. I wasn't under the microscope. And so I could do whatever I wanted. And that really F's me up because for whatever reason, I always feel like I don't have freedom to do the things that I don't want to do. I always feel constricted. Well, go ahead and get 4 drunk drivings and don't have a license. So you really are restricted, you stupid idiot. So anyway, go to the casino. I sleep in the truck. I wake up. I go to Wendy's. I talk to Miley. I got alcohol in the passenger seat of my truck. I eat. I drink. I pass out in a parking lot. Me and my parking lots and stop signs, right? I wake up to a bunch of cops, paramedics. I was passed out in the driver's seat, my head hunched over. I argued with the cops, got 2 resisting arrests, ended up in jail. Called the bail bondsman, and it was an astronomical amount. And I didn't have it. I didn't have anybody up there. I was 2 hours away from home, and it's crazy. And there's some things that I kind of want to share in this that I haven't been too open about. I think I've been open, but I don't believe in God. By the definition of atheist, I don't believe in God. I don't believe that there's evidence to justify a belief in that. And if you do, that's totally fine. I guess I'm still looking. I'm open to be convinced. It just hasn't happened yet. But something happened here that was kind of crazy. I called this bail bondsman, and I kept saying, please, there's something you're going to be able to do. And he's like, I'm not. There's nobody around here. And then he finally asked me, where do you work? And I told him. And he's like, so you work for Dan? And I was like, yes, I know Dan. I'll give him a call. I was like, oh my God, thank you. So my boss, who was Dan, came and bailed me out of jail and took me to be a client at the treatment center I was just a tech for. And I'll never forget, I got there, I feel like shit. I feel so stupid. And guys are coming up to me like, hey, Scott, can you give me this or that? I'm like, nope. I'm like, why not? I'm here with you, man. And then I'd gotten to the point, Harbor Hall had helped me be so open with my shit that I was just like, yeah, I'm here with you, man. And it wasn't that bad. It was kind of embarrassing, but it was more weird than embarrassing. And so I went through that treatment for 30 days. It wasn't the treatment that Harbor Hall was, but I took all the knowledge from Harbor Hall and I really started to implement it. So something that I didn't mention because I was going to not talk about it. When I went into Harbor Hall the second time, as I was walking in, Miley had sent me a text. And by the way, it was really weird that bails bond knew my boss, right? So Miley sent me a text, and as I'm walking in, I'm reading it. The only thing that I remember was the word disgusting, and the end was like, I hope you find whatever you're looking for or something. But it was a really long text, and I just, disgusting, and it was like, okay, I felt like it was like, don't ever talk to me again. That's what I felt like the message was saying. So I was already upset, and I walked in there, bawling my eyes out, heartbroken. You really fucking did it. You just turned her back. You just didn't earn her back. That sounds bad, but you just got, talking to her again. And what had happened is my sponsor was talking to her, and he talked to my grandma, and he talked to me, and he was trying to play counselor or therapist, and he was not certified. He should not have been doing that. I was okay with him doing that because I trusted him. He was like a brother to me, I thought. And he ended up telling Miley that I was offering. So go back. He kept telling me or implying that I should let Miley go. She was no good for me. That wasn't working, right? So he told Miley that I was offering women sexual favors to bring me alcohol. And so I was so drunk, I was like, fuck, did I do that? So I remember getting my phone back after I got out of treatment, going to sober living. And I kind of started fighting the shit out. And I'm scrolling through my message, I'm scrolling through my text, and I'm like, did I do this? Who do I have to apologize? It's so disgusting. That's so terrible. Miley's right. It is disgusting. I'm looking through my phone, and I can't find a thing about it. So I asked my sponsor, I'm like, hey, what's up with this message that you sent Miley? He's like, hey, I'd love to talk to you. I'd talk to you about it. I can't do it right now, but we'll talk soon. Guess what never happened? Never talked to me. Never responded to any messages that I sent after that. Probably because that fucking cocksucker made that shit up because he was trying to control my life because he thought he knew what was best for me. And I don't know how often that happens, but the fact that it happened even once is enough to pull the reins back a little bit and say, whoa, I'm not going to put my entire life in somebody else's hands that's just as fucked up as I am. And pardon my French. So that was yet another blow to my recovery. Something else. This guy that I trusted, that I thought of as a brother, that it was the guy that I told everything to, just totally raw dogged me. No lube. Terrible. Inappropriate, Scott. Anyway, so I finish up the treatment up north, and I come home. Hey, Lonnie. Dude, it's so good to see you here, man. Thank you so much for that intro music. Still, I say it every time we get on here, but I got to say it again now that you popped up. So I get done with the treatment. I think for myself for the first time in a long time. What do I want? I want to be near my kids. I want to be home with my grandma. I want to try to make things right with Miley. And so I got a tether on. Love you too, man. Thank you. And so I head home to be close to my family because my family wasn't the problem. Miley certainly was not the problem. My grandma wasn't, well, she had some problems, but she wasn't making me drink. I needed to be a father. I wanted to be near my children. So I moved back home. And that was pretty much the end of it. It hasn't been flawless. I'm not going to sit here and try to say that, but I'm in recovery completely. I'm living free from alcohol, controlling my life today, and happy ending, right? So Miley and I, we talk. We still love each other. We're back together. Not talking to my kids for almost 2 years. They're coming over every other weekend again. Um, Easton tells me he loves me all the time. Um, I got a job working as a recovery coach. And, I started this podcast somewhere in between, and this thing means the world to me, man. People that have come on here and shared their stories, to be willing to do that with this heathen guy, I never thought, and this podcast isn't anything. Thanks, man. Happy ending, right? That's my boy. So, so moved back in with Miley, got a job as a recovery coach. Last year, Grandma passed away. My mom passed away, and I didn't go back to the gutter. I'm not going to sit here and try to tell you that I didn't struggle, make mistakes, because this podcast is about being authentic and being honest. It was really hard, and it sucked. And then ended up in the hospital, and thought I was going to have my gallbladder out, and then it turned into, no, you have a cyst in your brain. Those are super challenging times. But while I thought about alcohol here and there was never that desire to just wash it all away completely. Did I want relief at times? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I did not want to throw it all away. And if I can make it to today to be where I'm at through brain surgery and my mom, grandmother passing, I think I'm going to be all right. I'm sure there's things that I forgot to say, but that's the meat and potatoes. 36 of you are listening or watching right now, and that means the world to me. My only hope is that by sharing this, it might help somebody out there, whether it be somebody in use or somebody that's with somebody that's using and struggling to understand it. There was never a time in my life that I didn't love my grandma, that I didn't love Miley, that I didn't love my boys. There was never a time in my use that I didn't love my friends and family and kids. That is not the case when somebody's struggling with it. I didn't love myself. And that's still a fucking struggle today. But it's a lot easier. It's a lot better. I don't hate myself today. I hated myself. I hated myself for letting baseball go. I hated myself for the things that I thought and said, when I was a little kid, I hated myself for, not having, a full-time job. I hated myself for, even though the marriage wasn't great and I needed to get out of it, I hated myself for being a failure at that too, because I left my kids, right? But even with the tears and even with all the shit that's happened to me, and even all of, grandma passing and the brain surgery and the daily life crap that we all have to deal with, life is way better now today, waking up, not coming to, going to sleep, and not passing out. And this one thing, and I'll leave you with this, okay? If you're out there and you're listening to this and you're thinking about quitting drinking, the amount of effort, and this is just for me, but I know through my job that a lot of people relate to this, the amount of effort it takes to hide your drinking, to get it, to not get caught with it, to drink it without getting caught, to hide the empties without getting caught, to get rid of the empties without getting caught, to spend money without getting caught. It's a goddamn job. It's a goddamn job. And I walked away from that job. And that alone is freeing in itself. And I regret things, but I'm happy where I am today, even if I don't act it like it sometimes. It's a pretty good life I have. Yeah, absolutely. I don't wake up feeling good all the time because I'm getting older, so shit hurts. But I feel a lot better than I would if I was hungover and everything still fucking hurt, right? But again, thank you. Ellie popped in, RJ popped in, Monty, Chris. I'm sure there's other people I know that are listening. Thank you for listening tonight. This has been my story. If you do listen to this and you have any questions or things that I might have been talking about and then stopped because I used to drink a lot and my brain's kind of charred, please feel free to send me a DM or email thesoberheathen@yahoo.com or shoot me a comment on YouTube. And I really hope that we can do this more often. I really enjoy it. And thanks again, guys. Have a great night.